Hello, welcome to ME 510, Economics and Policy of Engineered Energy Systems. This is part one of a two-part module on wind and solar energy. We will start with a discussion on the global renewable power market and the solar energy industry in particular. If you look at the global market, starting from 2004 to 2014, you will see that investment in renewable power and fuels has increased dramatically from a low of 45 billion US dollars in 2004 up to 270 billion dollars in 2014, and this number continues to increase. A lot of this investment has gone into wind and solar power, but you can see that we've had significant additions in hydropower capacity and biopower as well. What we're going to do now is talk about some of the how those additions have come in terms of specifically solar photovoltaics and wind turbines around the world, and specifically in the US. Many of these installations of renewable energy have been driven by policy targets from various countries, particularly the US and China, but also Europe. These policies have encouraged the penetration of renewable sources in order to lower the environmental impacts of the power sectors in their respective regions. These policies, as you can see below, can vary from specific targets or specific percentages that different utilities or companies are encouraged to meet in order to fulfill their obligations. If you look at all renewables in 2013, you can see that they still only account for about 20% of the total energy consumed around the world. Now, a growing percentage of this is what we will call modern renewables. So traditional biomass is still used, particularly in developing countries, either in the form of heat or cooking and other types of traditional uses. But these modern renewables includes biomass being used for things like biofuels, and also geothermal, solar heat, hydropower, wind, um, and other forms of what we're calling here modern renewables. As we've already mentioned, the investment rate has increased significantly, and so has the growth rate in the different sectors. Leading the way has been solar photovoltaics. This has experienced a growth rate of 30% between 2009 and 2014. In 2014, we see this tremendous 50% growth rate in solar photovoltaics. Now, we have to put this into perspective. The total installation of solar photovoltaics is much smaller than, for example, wind turbines. And so even though wind turbines only increased by 16% in 2014, the absolute capacity addition of wind power is still greater than solar photovoltaics. We see other types of renewable energy here, geothermal, hydropower, experiencing single-digit growth rates and focus on other types of applications. But solar photovoltaics and wind turbines have done significant growth in contributing to the electric generation in several countries. And that's what we see here in this figure. So as you can see here, the world total installation of renewable power production is nearing 700 gigawatts. A lot of this has been driven by installations in what are called the BRICS countries, Brazil, China, Russia. Particularly China, you can see that China leads the way in wind power installation. They're also installing solar photovoltaics, and of course they have quite a bit of biopower. They're followed by the United States and Germany, which have significant investment in wind power generation. In fact, the United States second in wind power additions as well. Okay. Please note that these tables do not include hydropower. Hydropower we do not cover in a lot of detail. The movement in that industry is a little bit slower than the solar and wind industries, particularly because hydropower installations tend to be very high capacity and consist of mega projects in most cases. Now, one important aspect of renewable power is that they tend to create greater jobs than the fossil-based power that they replace. So, but that depends also on the technology. biomass and biofuels per unit of energy generate a significant amount of jobs, both because of the logistics required to collect, convert, and deliver the biomass, and the facilities that have to run them, which have uh, job requirements that are similar to fossil-based facilities, but at this juncture in their development, tend to employ more people because of the challenges with using biomass versus something like coal that has been utilized for centuries. A similar aspect is happening with wind and solar. They're also generating a lot of jobs required for installing, maintaining, and servicing many of their facilities. In fact, we could say that in parts like the US, there's a shortage or a labor shortage for skilled men that can service wind turbines, and it's actually one of the most demanding job markets at this point. Solar photovoltaics, again, especially if you're looking at residential installations, there's a significant demand for skilled technicians that can install, service, and maintain these units. This table here just shows the number of direct and indirect jobs created by industry around the world. Direct jobs are those that require direct contact with the installation, so servicemen. Indirect jobs include those that are working on manufacturing parts or even sales and advertisements, for example. And so the estimated number is that for these industries, they've created about 7.7 million jobs around the world. And this does not include hydropower again, but you can see the distribution, as already mentioned, bioenergy contributing a significant amount of job creation, solar energy in all its different forms as well, creating a lot of jobs around the world. In terms of total solar photovoltaic additions, what we see here is that the global capacity is about 177 gigawatts. You may recall we're approaching 700 gigawatts of total installation capacity. So this is just a fraction of the total renewable power generated around the world. But it's a fast-growing sector, and so you can see here that the rate of installation increase is actually becoming greater as time moves on. 40 gigawatts around the world were added in 2014. So out of the 177 gigawatts, you can see that a significant fraction of that has just been added in recent years. Now, who's adding all this solar energy? Well, the leader in additions is China, as you can see here. They're closing in very rapidly with Germany, which has the largest installed capacity. This is in 2014, so they may have already exceeded Germany. But what you can see here is the pace at which China has been installing solar photovoltaics is tremendous. They're followed closely by Japan. The United States, again, depending on how policies and investment trends occur in the country, has years where they do install a significant amount of solar photovoltaics as well. But they lag behind 4 countries, at least in 2014, in terms of the total additions, total installations in the country. When we look at concentrating solar thermal power, what you're looking at here is particularly 2 countries dominating in this particular type of technology. Spain, because down in the southern part of Spain, where there's a significant amount of solar radiation, there are several projects that were famously installed there. The United States following closely behind. Concentrating solar thermal power systems typically involve very large installations, so you can sort of compare them to nuclear plants in the sense that in order to make them economical, they need that very large scale. And so that's part of the reason why you see these very large jumps from one year to another. These are not multiple installations, at least not a large number of them. It could just be one very large facility that was built in that year. The rest of the world hasn't taken into concentrating solar thermal power. That could change. There are some advantages to these systems, and we're still learning how to take advantage of them, not just for power generation, but also for heat and other applications. Another more traditional application is the use of solar water heating. And so this chart here just shows solar water heating use around the world. China leading the way with over 70% of the solar water heating capacity. The next 9 countries, including the United States, only have about 18%. And then you have developing countries of the rest of the world with 12% of water heating collectors. If you look at additions, China, very large addition in 2013, followed by Turkey. But again, these two charts are on different scales, and that just goes to show you the magnitude of the investment that China is doing in these kinds of renewable energy. Turkey, Brazil, India, Germany following China, but at a very much smaller scale. And so in terms of water heating collectors, you can see here 406 gigawatts, but these are thermal gigawatts. And so in terms of efficiency, if you were to convert this into electricity, you're talking about a third of its value in the form of electricity. But you can see here again, rapid growth rate, maybe slowing a little bit, but certainly not as fast as the power sector in terms of solar capacity additions. This concludes our presentation on solar installations and solar energy. And now we'll focus on what's happening in the wind energy industry.